Now look, I'm no Miyamoto, alright? But when I load up Mario Maker 2, a game that's meant for these monsters, why does this exist?
Oh no! Oh no!
Are you serious? This is torture!
Well said. Not actual hate towards these levels, just needed to make a point. I'm going to talk about skill floors and skill ceilings in video games, and some other stuff that we'll talk about eventually. But first, let's explain what do these funny words mean. Well, essentially, the skill floor is how accessible a game is. The more accessible your game is, the more people will give it a try, which in turn means the better, in some cases. So this is basically to help people with cognitive and motor accessibility. But what do those two words mean? Well, the definition of cognitive is relating to, being, or involving conscious, intellectual activity, such as thinking, reasoning, or remembering. Basically just using your noggin. Excuse me, what does this have to do with video games? Shut up, okay, I promise, I'll be quick about it. Let's look at Dungeons & Dragons. In D&D, a typical scenario plays out like this. You and your party will have to make a decision to either go this way or this way. And then once you go that way, an encounter will start. Be that an NPC you're talking to for that shiny shield, or enemies you're trying to kill for that shiny shield. Now, what do these two scenarios have in common other than a shiny shield? Well, it's the fact they will both eventually cause you to make even more decisions. With the NPCs, you could threaten him, knock him out, bribe him, rob him. There's almost an unlimited amount of things you could do as long as those dice roll nice. The enemy route, depending on what character you made, which is another gigantic labyrinth of decisions, you could shock them, stab them, snipe them, burn them, all sorts of things. But then you also gotta manage your movement speed, your spell slots, a bunch of other shit, and eventually you'll reach something called decision fatigue. The deteriorating quality of decisions made by an individual after a long session of decision making. If you've ever played a long session of D&D and wonder why you're ready to go home already, this is why. So why does this matter? Well, the best example I can show you about how you're making cognitive choices in games without noticing is this. Picking a character is a pretty tough choice in games, and one where I believe some games like Overwatch are trying to help with. For example, in Overwatch there's a pretty good amount of characters here, so where do you start? Well, the game eases you into saying, hey, this guy, pretty hard, but this one's good for beginners like you. This helps alleviate decision making when playing a new game. You pick up Smash for the first time, well, good fucking luck figuring out who's a good character to start with, because the game sure won't tell you. Next we have motor accessibility, and this one's a little easier to explain. It's basically a motion or action, like aiming or doing certain actions in games. The best example I can think of motor accessibility is this. To do all that, all I did was this. So now we've established the skill floor and how developers go about them. To put it simply, it's where all players are going to start. If the game's skill floor is low, that means it's easily playable by most people. If it's high, that means more skill is needed in order to play the game. So now what's the skill ceiling? It's described as the maximum skill a player can reach for effectiveness. In other words, it's how good you can get until it's nearly impossible to get any better. Does anyone ever really reach the skill ceiling? Well, no. For example, let's look at Mario again, but not this one, this one. Pretty easy, right? Your skill in this game is easily obtainable thanks to the opening field in the beginning. However, we jump into speedrunning and oh my god! However, I'm going to be looking at these in multiplayer games. So for reference, let's look at Overwatch. Overwatch has a very low skill floor and a very low skill ceiling. If we're being honest, a lot of this game is just knowing how to counter characters, which you can Google easily, or aiming. The game was designed to make sure that every player is on the same level of skill when they start. Can't manage ammo? Don't worry, they got that covered. Don't like managing health? Don't worry, they got that covered too. Don't like taking damage and want to be invincible? They got that covered too. You don't even know how to aim? Don't worry, they got that covered too. And once you reach that point of effectiveness, there's not really a huge gap between someone in the higher rankings and someone in the lower rankings of the game other than aiming better. Overwatch minimized the skill needed to get good at the game, but by doing that, they also shrunk the skill ceiling, making sure that everyone can pull off cool techniques that aren't even hard to do. I love how people point out the complexity in Overwatch that can be applied to every other game. Character knowledge, map knowledge, micromanagement of ammo and health, cutting off frames of unnecessary animation, that has been around since the Xbox Live days of Halo 2. Everything cool about other first-person shooters is gone in Overwatch. Insane quickscope headshots? Well, we're gonna tell you when you can fire. Super crazy and fun movement mechanics? Oh no, we can't have that in our game. We have to sacrifice fun in order to keep everyone on the ground. After all, how will new players be able to keep up with experienced players? Look, Blizzard, I'm gonna tell you news you've apparently never heard. New players shouldn't be as good players. By doing this, you're turning off almost every good player of the game and they're moving on to other things. Okay, but that's enough about Overwatch. So we've looked at low lows, but what about high highs? Well, that's where we're gonna enter Street Fighter 3. Now everyone here knows that I love fighting games, okay? That's nothing new. However, I will be fair and say that if you put a new player and a slightly more experienced player together, new players won't even have a chance, alright? Even experienced players probably couldn't handle Daigo in his final form. So realistically, new players are gonna be starting here, and they will most likely not leave until they really work for it. However, once you do leave, goddamn can you do some crazy shit. Now later I'm going to cover why this is impressive. For now though, basically what he did looked impossible. Unlike Overwatch, where once two players get here, they can't really be any more effective in their mechanics. In this, they can just keep on climbing and climbing, and one player will never be so good they cannot improve even further. Now I know that also applies to this. The difference is, getting from here to here is way easier, and once you reach here, the game's no longer fun, it's just frustrating. But you know what else is frustrating? Getting destroyed over and over and over and over and over. So yeah, having a high skill ceiling is a good thing, but when you pair that with a high skill floor, most people won't even give your game a chance. So now we have to find the perfect skill floor and skill ceiling combination. Well, luckily we don't have to, because people have been doing it for generations. But before I get into what game I'm talking about, let me show you this. Musicians are crazy. They can take a concept so basic as music, which children can do, and go to the extreme with it. This is how we should handle video games. Give the player something really easy and make them become a mastermind with an easy tool set to create some fucking chaos. Now I think we all already know where I'm going with this. Super Smash Bros. Mostly these two. Are exactly what games should be like. So dummy easy that two 6-year-olds can have fun, but have a skill ceiling so high that good players can do some ridiculous shit. Not only that, but make sure if some kids really push themselves, they can become even better with each match or round or whatever. Of course, this isn't as easy as it sounds. Making it too easy, the game can end up like this. Making it so advanced in mechanics, your game can turn out like this. However, if you can get more games like this, I think video games can reach a real demographic and help more people get into certain genres. Again, with motor and cognitive accessibility. Also, with letting new players have fun and get better with the game without having to master mechanics and the engine, but let those experienced players who have mastered the engine go way beyond the quote-unquote proper way to play the game. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to shit on one of my favorite childhood games for the next video.